Welcome to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and this is episode number 309 of the podcast. And on this episode of the podcast, I'm talking about the Baltimore Orioles. Last season, the Baltimore Orioles came out of nowhere and won 101 games, winning the AL East for the first time since 2016. And so far this season, the O's are 16-8. And what's scary about this team is for as good as they are right now, they have a chance to get even better. And the reason I say that is because of their young core of position players, and we can start with the obvious ones. Catcher Adley Rutschman, who is already one of the best catchers in the game, and the team has been winning ever since he was called up to the majors. And I know some people are talking about the fact that they drafted him ahead of Bobby Witt Jr., but Rutschman, to me, is a key to the Orioles franchise in the present and the future. And offensively, he's going to get better because this season, in the early stages, he's currently batting .327. If you can have a catcher play 140 games, bat .300, hit 15 to 20 homers, you've got something special. That's something that a lot of teams no longer have. Historically, franchise catchers can change teams. Look at what Johnny Bench did for the Cincinnati Reds. Look at what Mike Piazza did for the New York Mets. Look what Buster Posey did for the San Francisco Giants. That's what Adley Rutschman is currently doing to the Baltimore Orioles. He is making them legit contenders. Next, I want to talk about a player who I believe is currently their best positional player, Gunnar Henderson. Last year's Rookie of the Year. He has a shocking amount of power. He's currently third in the league with 8 home runs. I personally would not be surprised if he is a future MVP award winner. He has that it factor. He is so exciting to watch play the game of baseball. If he were in a bigger market than Baltimore, we would be talking about him on a daily basis. He may already be a top 5 to 10 player in Major League Baseball. I mean, this guy is a star, and I've just noticed it recently. His behemoth home runs are insane. He doesn't look like a guy who has that insane amount of power, but he does. Rutschman and Henderson are the building blocks of this organization. They should be signed to long-term contracts. They should be the faces of the franchise. Then we have 2 high first-round draft picks who are emerging this season. The first one is Colton Cowser, who currently has 6 home runs to go along with a .333 batting average. I watched him crush my team, the Boston Red Sox. And then you have third baseman Jordan Westburg, who has 5 home runs with a .310 batting average. So now you can add these guys to their already consistent core that includes Ryan Mountcastle, Cedric Mullins, and Anthony Santander. Baseball has never been a sport where you can build around one star player. That's why it never worked out with the Angels and Mike Trout. You need to build a great team around your star players. And that's what the Baltimore Orioles are doing. And they have a chances to hit on multiple stars. I don't know what the ceiling is for these 2 players, but if they can become consistent guys who can hit 20 to 25 homers a season to go along with Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson, then they are very valuable to what's going on in Baltimore. The Houston Astros became the Houston Astros not because they had one superstar player, but because everyone in their starting 9 lineup was a threat to go deep. They had Jose Altuve, they had Carlos Correa, then Alex Bregman emerged, then Yordan Alvarez emerged, Cole Tucker, the list goes on. And another reason why I think what Baltimore is doing with all of these position players is brilliant is because of what is going on with starting and relief pitching. They're all getting hurt or they're either inconsistent. You don't spend money and valuable resources on pitching anymore because you just don't know what you're going to get. Yes, they traded for Corbin Burns. I think that's a good trade, and hopefully they do sign him long term, but they're not lost as an organization if he doesn't, because you don't know what you're going to get out of starting pitchers year in and year out anymore because they're all getting injured and they don't throw 200 innings anymore. The ace pitcher is dying, and Baltimore now has a foundation of really good position players. And that's what happened last season with the Texas Rangers. Yes, they had impressive pitching in the postseason, but look, their big acquisition last year was Jacob deGrom. He went out, but they were still able to win the World Series because of their emerging position players. Adolis Garcia came out out of nowhere and became one of the best players in baseball. Josh Jung and Jonah Heim also were really big last season for the Texas Rangers. They're the reasons the Rangers won the World Series. And Corey Seager, of course, Marcus Semien, that team had a stacked lineup. That's how you win World Series nowadays. It's not via starting pitching. The last team that won because of their starting pitching to me was the 2019 Washington Nationals, who had Steven Strasburg, who's now out of the game due to injury, Max Scherzer, who's getting hurt all of the time. My point is, you just can't bank your entire future on one star pitcher, because that guy might end up having Tommy John surgery, and then where does that leave you? What the Orioles are doing is they have about, 10 positional players who, if they hit on 5 of them and they become as special as they believe they're going to be, they become a legitimate baseball team. And that's seemingly what is happening with the Baltimore Orioles. They are hitting on their position players. And they also have young players in waiting. Jackson Holliday, he had a call up to the big leagues. It didn't work out. He's now back in the minors, but people still project him to be a future star in the sport. And they also have Keston Kierstad. If these guys become the players many believe they will be, that could take the Orioles to the next level. This past offseason, we all talked about the Dodgers because they spent the money. But the teams that emerge are the ones who build up a core. That's what happened to the Yankees in the 90s, the Bruce Bochy-led Giants, and the aforementioned Houston Astros. Yes, the Dodgers may win the World Series this year because they're stacked. They have Mookie Betts, they have Freddie Freeman, they have Shohei Ohtani. What I'm saying is I feel like the future for the Baltimore Orioles is brighter because of all of the young position players they have. They have guys who are going to be, presumably if the team pays them, on the team and very good for the next 7 to 10 seasons. I do wonder how most baseball fans feel about that opinion. Do more people want to be the Dodgers or the Orioles? I would rather be the Baltimore Orioles because they're building a foundation of players, and players always play their best baseball with the first team. I mean, the Dodgers are filled with guys who are on their second or third team. And call me old-fashioned, I just love the idea of these guys developing together. They came up together. They're going to play in the big leagues together. I think that's still how you kind of build a winning baseball team. I don't think you can just buy a bunch of players and have them win. It didn't work out for the San Diego Padres. It didn't work out for the New York Mets. You build a baseball team steadily, and that's what the Orioles are doing. They have built up a very good baseball team who are used to playing baseball games together. They are a real team. One of the things that annoys me the most about the Baltimore Orioles is the amount of people not giving them credit for this rebuild. And their argument is that's what happens when you are bad for a long time. You get high draft picks, and that's fair. But baseball isn't like other sports where high draft picks play right away. The Orioles have hit on a high amount of picks, and they deserve credit for building their baseball team. There are plenty of baseball teams who have been bad for so long, yet they haven't hit on the draft and produced star players. And the ones that come to mind are the Rockies, the Marlins, the White Sox. The Orioles are doing something right, and it's more than just picking the right player. Clearly, they have become a consistent and functional organization. Look at what's going on with the Marlins. They have become a disaster because they let their really good general manager leave the organization. They haven't picked up the option of their manager, Skip Schumacher, and now they're one of the worst teams in all of baseball. And last season, they made the playoffs. Like, there's no momentum building towards the Marlins. They can only have one good season at a time. What the Orioles are doing, to me, feels like they're having season after season where they're going to be consistent. That's what good teams do. That's something I've always admired about the St. Louis Cardinals, is every season you knew that the Cardinals were going to be good to great. They were going to be an 85 to 95 win team. Some years were going to be more special than others, and you can't win the World Series every season, but the Cardinals were going to be in contention for a playoff spot. In the future, I see the Orioles contending for a playoff spot each of the next 7 to 10 seasons. That's how I feel about the Baltimore Orioles. And there's not a lot of baseball teams I feel that way about. I like what the Kansas City Royals are doing, but this offseason they paid for pitching, and that pitching could go away in a heartbeat. Yes, they have Bobby Witt Jr., but I don't know if this Orioles team is building towards something that's going to last a long time the way I feel like the Orioles are going to last. The model that the Orioles need to copy is what's going on with the Atlanta Braves. They locked up all of their key position players to long-term contracts that, when you look at them, seem pretty affordable. I mean, they're not massive deals. I like the deal that they gave Michael Harris. I think he's a really good outfielder who could outplay that contract. Those are the type of deals you want to give away if you're the Baltimore Orioles. You want to lock up Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson. You've got to keep the right players and let go of the ones that you don't really need. Like, I think Ryan Mountcastle and Anthony Santander, who's going to be a free agent, those are probably guys you can let go because of these younger players who are emerging. That's okay, but you got to keep your star players. And right now, to me, that's Gunnar Henderson and that's Adley Rutschman. I would also really look into keeping Corbin Burns. You found a veteran pitcher who is that rare guy who's going to throw 180 innings for you every season. If you can get him to a 6-year deal, I would do that in a heartbeat. I have given them credit for picking the right players. Now they need to do the right thing and lock them up. That's what happened with my Boston Red Sox. They had all the right players. They had Mookie Betts. They had Xander Bogaerts. They picked the right guys to build around, and then when it was time to pay them, or they could have gotten them in a more affordable contract than they got, they let them walk. Now Bogaerts is with the Padres and Betts is with the Dodgers. As someone who has followed the American League East for close to 20 years now, being a Red Sox fan, I've seen every team in the division have their moments. As the best team in the division, I know the Yankees and Red Sox are the ones who get mainstream attention, but the Blue Jays, Rays, and Orioles have fared well going against two teams that have, for the most part, had the massive payrolls. But one does have to wonder if these teams are catching up to the Red Sox and Yankees, because the Red Sox and Yankees are not spending like they used to. Like, there is a serious question as to whether or not Juan Soto is going to be a rental for the New York Yankees. If this was 2005, Juan Soto would already have a massive extension with the New York Yankees. Let's say Soto does sign with the New York Yankees. I don't think they become that big of a threat to the Baltimore Orioles, because the Yankees really only have two great star positional players in Aaron Judge and Juan Soto. The Orioles have multiple and maybe more on the way. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the Baltimore Orioles. We have not seen the best version of this baseball team, and that's impressive and wild to say, because this is a team that won over 100 ball games last season, and they still have the chance to get better. For position players, their peaks are like 26 to 32. I mean, Gunnar Henderson is going to be even better than he is now. Adley Rutschman is going to be even better. Jackson Holliday is likely going to grow into the player that many people think he's going to become. And then another thing in all this is that they could have so many position players that they can now trade some of them for starting pitching if that's what they need. The Orioles far and away have the brightest future in this division. With the Boston Red Sox, you have no idea what they're going to be in the next 2 seasons. Is ownership ever going to spend money again? I have no idea. Is Cutter Crawford really as good as he looks right now? I don't have the answer to that. I don't know what the future for the Boston Red Sox looks like. It doesn't look as good as the Baltimore Orioles. And then with the Yankees, I said Aaron Judge is great, and it would be good if they keep Juan Soto, but I think the key to the Yankees is really Anthony Volpe. If he can become something special, if he can become a star at the shortstop position, I'll begin to take them a little bit more seriously. They need some young talent on that team. Anthony Rizzo cannot be a key to your team anymore. They also need that Jason Dominguez to come back from injury and be a star player. The Rays are always going to be an up and down team because they can't afford to pay anyone. I think they're going to lose Randy Arozarena in the coming seasons because he's going to demand a big time contract because he's a big time player. That's what happens with the Rays. Maybe they'll still be a consistent 80 to 85 win team, but they can't compete with the Baltimore Orioles, especially if the Orioles can keep this talent together. And that gets us to the most frustrating team in the division, the Toronto Blue Jays. They're the ones who seemed like they had the young talent. They have Bo Bichette. They have Vladimir Guerrero Jr. They have Kevin Biggio. Yet this team continues to underperform, and I don't understand why. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. looked like a legitimate MVP candidate 2 seasons ago. Now he looks like just another guy. He's still better than most sluggers, but he's not the star player we all thought he was going to be. Bo Bichette is the real deal, but something is really off with that organization. I don't know if it's the manager. He seems clownish at times, but something is holding that team back from reaching its potential. They're one of those teams that when they hit, they don't pitch. When they pitch, they don't hit. They just don't make any sense to me whatsoever. They have Jose Barrios. They have Kevin Gausman, 2 of the better pitchers in the league. They have that offensive talent, and yet they continue to underperform. With everything I've said on this podcast, it is worth noting that it is a dangerous game to predict in sports the future success of an organization. But how can you not feel good about the current state of the Baltimore Orioles, especially if new ownership spends money? If they can keep the core of their team together for the next 7 to 10 years, we're talking about one of the best teams in all of baseball. And that's a big if. Injuries can also come into play, but I feel like there's going to be less injury issues with the Baltimore Orioles because their best players are not starting pitchers. They're position players. And if they develop 5 of these players into star players and lose one of them, you can survive an IL stint from one of your star players if you have multiple stars. I'm not big into making predictions, but my prediction is this: the Baltimore Orioles are going to win a World Series in the next 5 seasons because they are hitting on these position players, and Gunnar Henderson is going to be a massive reason why. I think this guy, like I said earlier, is going to be a future MVP. I could see him winning the All-Star Game MVP, even though that doesn't matter, and win World Series MVP. I mean, everything is coming up Orioles, and I think these stories are good for sports, that these teams went through all of the losing, and now the fan base is being rewarded with a great product. That's what makes all of the losing worth it. You went through all of that, and now you have Adley Rutschman on your team. That's how sports are supposed to be. You go through the bad times so you can get to the good times, and the Orioles are on the good times. And I have faith in them that they're going to take advantage of this moment. I think they are going to keep this core together. Again, they might lose some players like Ryan Mountcastle and like Anthony Santander, but those are not key pieces. The key pieces are Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, Jackson Holliday may become a key piece, Corbin Burns at the right price. Those are the players that should be mainstays in your organization. And it's early in the baseball regular season, but a World Series matchup I would love to see is the Baltimore Orioles versus the LA Dodgers, because they are on opposite sides of the spectrum. The Dodgers have built their team with an unlimited amount of money. They have Tyler Glasnow now. They have Mookie Betts. They have Freddie Freeman. They have Shohei Ohtani. They have Teoscar Hernandez. All guys who they brought in from other teams. And then the Orioles on the other side, they are a homegrown ball club. And those are the teams that are usually the faces of baseball. They are the teams that usually become the dynasties. The homegrown Orioles versus the team that won the offseason, I mean, that would be a fascinating World Series matchup, and one that we should all be rooting for, because the Orioles are exciting. Their roster is not filled with superstars yet, but they are going to be ones. Gunnar Henderson is going to be a superstar, and I still think Adley Rutschman is going to be a superstar. And the Orioles emerging as a contender is really good for baseball because of all of the young talent. That's what baseball needs, is exciting young stars like Gunnar Henderson. Baseball needs Jackson Holliday to become a star player. I may be a fan of the Boston Red Sox, but I'm more a fan of what the Orioles are doing and how they are building their organization. They are picking the right players. They have multiple position players who could become star players on the way. And they have a core that they should definitely keep together. Again, I keep reiterating this because it's the key to the Orioles' future. They need to keep the band together. If they let Adley Rutschman go because they don't want to pay him, or they let Gunnar Henderson go because they don't want to pay him, that would be the biggest mistake they've ever made. They need to keep this group together because this group is something special. They won 101 games last season, and they're going to be just as as good this season, if not better, and they have star players on the way. Jackson Holliday has all of the hype. If he's half the player these baseball nerds thinks he's going to be, they've got something special. I'm rooting for the Baltimore Orioles in the future, and I think you should too. It's good for baseball to have a young team like this who's gone through a lot of losing, and now they're having an up period. It's good for the sport that they aren't bad forever. That's not what baseball wants. Baseball wants teams like the Baltimore Orioles. Thanks for listening to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so please rate, review, and subscribe.